So I had to walk back to my car to get the SD card so we can actually log data. So I thought I might show you where this is. My car is just right. There's a lot of gnarled trees, but it's like right behind these trees. It's not too far. Maybe, I don't know, 50 yards or so. And then this is actually a really cool spot. Like I could see like the trees clear here, and then we get down and there's this giant clearing. Kind of hard to see, but it's just this clearing and it's this depression, and there's a lot of these ATV trails. The professor that I work with from FAMU, she's a geology professor who studies these ponds under the context of like ecology, because there are these endangered species who live in these ponds because they can dry up and fish can't predate on their eggs during the spawning period. But they're kind of endangered because ATVs tear up the place a lot. And I'm seeing that here because having been an ATV instructor, it's very clear when, like right here, it's a turn. I mean, you don't have to be familiar with ATVs to realize that like something tore this land up here, and the tire tracks was pretty clear giveaway. But also there's just a lot of shotgun shells and clay pigeons out here, which is a little concerning, just because there's one right there. I don't know. Our seepage meter just has a red bulb at the top, and heck, that's a pretty good target. So be a little weary to leave it out here. But yeah, oh, clay pigeon right there. But yeah, this is actually really neat because this is a very good example of what's known as mantled karst. So karst is just dissolution of rock, dissolving rock underground. A lot of karst features include sinkholes, more tire tracks, actually. Ooh, almost got stuck there, it looks like, off-road vehicles. So karst features include sinkholes and a lot of springs. And what this area essentially is there's a mantle, a veneer of sand sitting on top of limestone, and as that limestone dissolves, you know, gravity takes over and it pulls the sand down too, and so you get these depressions. And so we're in the Woodville Karst Plain right now, which is a geomorphic region around Tallahassee, between Tallahassee and Gainesville. Sorry, my thing, there's a little beep when my thing goes off and I just heard it. The Woodville Karst Plain stretches from around Gainesville to Tallahassee, and it's just this region where there's a lot of, it's a karst field. There's a lot of sinkholes, a lot of springs. Yeah, but we're currently in that, and so we get these like small depressions and small ephemeral ponds all over the national forest and in the area. Yeah, notably like Wakulla Springs, but also where we're working. So hopefully I can get some progress. Which, if the thing reset, that means that that's a good sign for me, because it's programmed to reset once it hits a certain point. Which I'd be elated if it did. So it's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of like time limits on this program, about a minute each for everything. So it's a lot of waiting, 1 minute for something to happen. So I'll be back. Yeah. So I'm not having the best of luck right now. It looks like I'm having that same issue with the pump, being that it's not squeezing the tube enough to create peristalsis and actually put water in. But I've actually learned some interesting stuff right here. Is that how this works is that the program decides, using the water level sensor, whether essentially groundwater is entering this pond or whether the pond is draining to the groundwater. And even though that the pump isn't working, it's going into the script that oh, what's name? Sorry. It's going into the script that chooses whether it pumps water in or out is dependent on whether the pond is either gaining or losing water. But it's going into the script in which the pond is losing water, which is actually really interesting because it kind of tells what's going on in this situation. So we're essentially sitting in the middle of a bowl, and the water table essentially mirrors topography, so that you'd expect the water level to be higher as we go out that way, as we go up the bowl, the sides of the bowl, and out. And these ponds are thought to exist, or ponds exist when the water table intersects the land. So when the water table is on top of the ground surface, that's going to be where water fills up. But what's interesting is that there's not that much difference between here and there in elevation, but there is no water over there. It looks a little bit higher, I'll give it that, which it doesn't take much, it doesn't seem. But the difference is that this ground right here is very muddy, and there's a lot of water component in it, and it's probably, it's about the same elevation as over here. Granted, where the tire trucks have dug up, it's a little bit more moist, so it might be, yeah, it's pretty, it's about the same here in terms of muddiness. The old how muddy is an area by walking on it test. But what this tells me is because that script over there is going into the negative seepage case, it tells me that likely this pond is draining into the groundwater, into the superficial aquifer system. And so what that tells me is that A, the water table is pretty low because that water always flows from high to low, so this must be higher than the water table. But what this also tells me is that if this pond is draining, it's going to be draining extremely slowly because it hasn't changed much since yesterday. That tire was still there, about the same distance, I'd say, just based off of my memory and some observation. But it means that this pond is perched, essentially. I imagine that this pond could become perched, is a better way to say it. I don't know whether it is right now, but this mud is it has such a low conductivity that water can't flow through it very easily, and it allows this pond to exist, which is probably why this is the only pond that I've been able to find that still has water right now. When I pounded that fence post in right there with that hammer, it went extremely easily, which is telling me that there's a lot of mud right here, probably at least 2 to 3 feet thick of this very, very, I don't even know what you'd call it. It's a peat soil, as I've been told. We never classified soils by whether they're peat or mineral until I got into a wetlands class, instead of a geology class. But I call this a peat soil, so this is actually really interesting because this place is sequestering carbon as plant matter decay or dies and gets deposited here and turns into soil, to this mud. So that's kind of a neat place. Initial observations, I don't know how valid they are, but something to think about. Unfortunately, this pump isn't working. That's really bumming me out, but I might have to pack up, come back later. But it's a good initial investigation of the area, I'd say. Oh, geesh, that one was a little muddier than I expected. It's also kind of maybe not peculiar, but this pond is lower than these other 2 depressions here. Just something to note. Man, I really wish I had what's it called? Rain in my pond, water in my pond that I was studying before, make this a lot easier, but oh well, we're learning. Actually, completely irrelevant. Well, but when I first came out here, I was like, wow, this place is so, like, desolate. There's no, I mean, you can hear the highway, so that's probably scaring some stuff away. And, you hear the occasional bird, but I was like, wow, there's, like, no life out here outside of the trees. But then, it wasn't until I had to actually step in this water, that I realized how much life is teeming in here. There's, like, so many little critters. Lots of flies flying. I don't know if you can see them, but a lot of different insects flying. There's a lot of things in the water. There's these, I've been noticing these tadpoles, some larval state. I don't know if that counts as larva, but I'm going to say it is. Some, like, juvenile state of something. Maybe a frog, maybe amphibian, maybe striped newts that we're talking about. These endangered amphibians. But a lot of these, like, just water bugs and some stuff floating around there. And, God, you know that there's some critters crawling around in here. Actually, I scratched my hand when I installed this thing. I didn't notice, but I had a little scratch, little blood. And nothing big, like, I didn't even notice it, but I don't have anything to clean it out. And I'm hoping that it's okay if I clean it out later. I won't get, like, I don't know, bacteria in me. That'll be detrimental. So we'll see. Hopefully nothing happens the next couple days, but also nothing to prove for it, because this pump isn't working. But it's logging, actually. I wonder what it's logging. I don't know if me stepping in here messed it up. It might have, actually. And changing the water level. And it'll just never, oh geez, that mud. It'll just never return to the initial state or meet the shutoff or criteria. I don't know if this makes sense, because I'm just talking out loud, thinking out loud at this point, but at least it's a nice day. Oh, it just turned off. So that's a good sign. Maybe I'll have some log data, who knows. But, yeah, I've also realized that it's a pretty bad idea to wear a white long sleeve shirt as I'm playing in the mud. But either way, it's a pretty neat place. I can understand why people want to come out here and with their four-wheel drive vehicles and want to, I don't know, spend some time out here. It's really, these trees out here, these are really, like, gnarly. I think they're oaks, but I haven't taken a look at them. That doesn't make sense. Oaks are evergreen. No, they're not. Ignore that sentence. I think they're oaks, but yeah, they're really kind of, makes it feel like a really old place. And then you have these new growth of these pines surrounding these ponds, which I find is pretty common. And then, like, the larger pines in the back. I don't know. Pretty neat. Pretty neat place. And then this guy. Who knows? Anyway. Some other initial observations about this site that I'm going to have to figure out a little more precisely later. Let's see if I can keep myself steady. Oh, geez. Yeah, it's really muddy. Really muddy. It's something that we're worried or concerned about. Let's see, can you see me if I face east? I don't know. The sun's really bright. There's no clouds out. But what we're worried about, or what we're concerned about, is flow. So a little hydrogeology lesson is that water always flows from high to low. We call it head. So it's essentially the elevation of the water. Water will always flow downhill, if you want to think about it, from high head to low head. And there are couple different flow, I don't know what the right term is, like regimes. Flow regime doesn't sound right, but you have local flow, which is just, if we were talking about this pond, it's going to flow from the water table is probably going to be higher on that hill. It's going to flow from that hill to this base level of the pond. Sorry. Pump activated, tried messing with it. Thought maybe I could fix it, didn't fix it. Bummer. But, so we're worried about local flow as it just flows into this pond from a higher elevation, but we also care about regional flow, not just this basin of this pond. So how is it the water flowing from way over there over here? Where is that going to occur? How is that going to occur? How much is it going to occur? Or even if it will occur, because who knows, this might not be the ultimate place for water to eventually go. It might just skip it entirely, depending on, you can think of these flow paths similar to pipes. Perhaps that pipe just goes underneath this pond and goes somewhere else. And we're worried about like where that regional flow, or we're interested, not worried, we're interested in where that regional flow is. So if you think about, like I previously stated, water table typically mirrors topography. Where you're going to have a higher elevation, you're going to have a higher water table, especially in Florida where the water table is extremely shallow. Too many bugs. So I want to know where the regional flow direction is. That's part of what I'm concerned about. So if we can do this easily online, or not online, but on a computer by using GIS and mapping out the elevation, which is something I'm probably going to have to do. But we're going to do some field observations essentially. So I don't know how to keep this steady. My arm gets tired. But yeah, so what we know is that, as I called this, the base level, it's just like a place where water, it's a low, what's it called? Low potential energy. Water likes to flow there. It's called a base level, but ultimate base level, I think is what it's called, is the ocean, because that's the lowest point that water can flow to, more or less, is the ocean. So we know that, here in the panhandle of Florida, you have higher elevations to the north, and then to the south of us is the ocean. So, general flow direction is going to be from north to south. Maybe, but it can deviate northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest, etc., etc. But what I'm noticing just off of here, using my observational skills here, let me switch the camera over. Just using some observational skills, I know that the highway's over there, the airport's over there. That's pretty flat, and it's also a bit lower. I believe it's lower on the other side of the highway. I guess the airport's more over there. But when I was driving here from that direction, this area was to my left, the airport was to the right, and it looked like the airport was lower in elevation, like they dug it out, which is good, have stable ground for your airport. And then when I look over here, we have this very prominent rim of this basin here, and then it gradually still raises up. So I'm starting to think that we might have some easterly, there's a ridge, which is kind of ironic. Not ironic, but interesting for me to think about, because my other pond is out yonder east of here, a little southeast, and we are predicting that regional flow would be northwest to southwest-ish. But just based on, there's a plane. Based on what I'm seeing right here, it looks like the at least sub-regional flow appears to be more eastern to western. So I don't know, some interesting things going on. Obviously, very limited viewpoint from what I'm seeing right now, but it's something to think about. These are the things that I have to pay attention to and keep note of. Might be useful later. But yeah, at least it's a nice day. And get me thinking about my field hydrogeology. Yeah, nice day at least. So I've been thinking a lot about this, ATVs in general, because as I worked as an ATV instructor, you know, and an environmentalist. It's kind of a paradox, um, because they're loud, they're destructive, they tear up these ponds, they endanger species if you know, get into the mud, and destroys the natural vegetation. But, you know, we had this debate at Zastro a lot, being the ATV camp. A lot of people didn't like Zastro, and they didn't like us because we allowed the use of ATVs, aka doing our job, that we were hired for. They didn't like that ATVs were being used at Philmont because, you know, all those reasons, those negative reasons. But it makes you think, shifting away from the environmental side and getting more into the social side. Maybe an all-terrain vehicle is what, I don't know, it provides more access if that's how people get into nature, to appreciate it. You know, maybe it's not an entirely bad thing if it's getting more people out and involved. And it kind of reminds me of how people, a lot of environmentalists will get mad at hunters or fishers, for like hurting nature by killing it. But they're also hunters and fishers, and they're some of the biggest proponents for conservation areas because they want to preserve it, and preserve that lifestyle. It kind of has this duality where perhaps they may be doing harm, but they're also controlling populations. They're also providing funding to preserve lands. And although ATVs are relatively new, relatively within the past, I don't know, 50 years, I don't know, I'm just pulling that number out of nowhere. You know, maybe the off-highway vehicle, all-terrain vehicle community will come together and kind of find some common ground, as for where they can ride, places they want to protect where they can't ride, etc. Because I don't know, I've been thinking about this as I'm standing here in the middle of nowhere. Another plane. There's a lot of tracks, there's a lot of deer tracks, and you know, between the highway being right there, the airport, these ATV trails, tracks, and then like these natural systems where this is probably the only source of water around for a while. It's the only pond I can find. Only source of water around for these animals. This is very much a like confluence between, quote unquote, the natural world and the anthropogenic world. This is that crossroads right here. I'm still a believer that humans are not above nature, but I will say that there is an argument to be made with, you know, humans being different. Oh, that's a frog. Oh, I just saw a frog also. Yeah, I'd say there's an argument to be made about that philosophy, but I don't know. ATVs are bringing people out here to experience this. I'm not going to say that, you know, just because they're appreciating it doesn't mean that gives them the right to tear it up, but it's something to think about. It's a complex issue, kind of a philosophical, moral issue, but it's interesting. Makes me think. Also, this is just a really neat place. I really wish we could set up like a satellite lab here. Not like a satellite, but like a field station here, because I feel like this would be a really good place to study surface water groundwater interaction. There's a lot of like land. It's all public land, so we wouldn't be able to like build on it, but I don't know, maybe put some temporary, either a structure or a desk, some tables, would be good. Yeah, really cool place. Big fan.